let's go ahead and get started. People can keep filtering in if they do, not a big deal. So almost done with the conference, yeah? I'm nearly the last spot here. How's it been for y'all? Good conference? Yeah? Yeah. It's not a bad gig when you can sit in the sunshine and eat good food and talk about fun things. I've certainly been to worse conference venues and eaten way worse food. So, well, my name is Jon Terry. Hopefully you'll see that I'm rather better behaved than another guy by that name, although I don't make nearly as much money either, so trade-offs. I am co-founder and co-CEO of a company called LeanKit, US-based Kanban software company. And I'm going to talk to you today about, tell a bit of a story of a place where we were a couple of years ago and things that we did to improve that. As I do this, really big disclaimer, this is our story, this is our context, and these are things that worked for us. So while I hope it's instructive, there may be ideas here, but just be careful that there's no one-size-fits-all, just do these things and you'll achieve success. Setting the stage a little bit for kind of, as I tell this story, I know some of you guys are from very big companies, some of you all are from startups. LeanKit is about a 120-person company. The technology side of the house is about half of that. I have had experience running very large IT organizations into the hundreds and thousands, so I'd like to tell you that things I'm going to tell you about here can be applicable, but also, you know, your results may vary based on the type of organization that you're in. So this story starts, while we are a company that started in 2009 and first launched in 2010, this story is one that really started in 2015. And that summer, we raised our first venture capital. Up till then, we had been self-funded. You know, I mortgaged my house and we put it on credit cards, and my mom and dad put in some money, and angel investors, you know, dumb people who, you know, didn't know that they could lose all their money. Or, you know, like my wife who loved me enough that she put up with it regardless. So first, professional investors, right? And if you know about startups, you know, if you read the trade press, getting VC money, that's success, right? That's the end of the journey. You know, they wrote us a check for $15 million, and that's just done, it's arrived, everything scales, and it's the rocket ship to the sky. Well, for us anyway, not exactly. Instead, probably 6 months into raising this money and hiring a lot of people and taking office space and all these kinds of things, I didn't have more results. What I had was lots of new people fighting with each other. So I had hired a lot of very smart, very expensive developers, and some of them wouldn't be in the same room with each other and were demanding that I create veto rules for who got to decide over who when an argument started. You know, basically it's John, lay down the law, and when I can tell him to shut up. Because he's a jerk, he's stupid, Node is terrible, you know, Windows is horrible, Linux is the best. It was really bad. You know, and this is partly because it's a lot of dudes, right? And they're stupid and they like to puff up their chests and be smarter and louder than the other guy. But it was really, really frustrating. And it was dangerous because unlike before where, you know, we were small and scrappy and essentially it was our own money, this is now professional money and the clock is ticking. So I've got to make something happen. So what I did, and this is, I'm going to sort of start with an event and then this sort of bleeds over into a series of things and learning. But we had an event, I think we called it a Trust Fall Symposium, where we got all the senior leaders of the technology side of the house together and you know, basically talked with them about how things had to change. Self-organization is all super cool and awesome and agile, but it's my company and my neck on the line, and I wasn't going to let them self-organize me into bankruptcy. I had to get them together, and we were going to have to change things. We were going to have to really change things. What I did to start off this is, and this is going to be different in different contexts, but anytime you're kicking off a change program, organizational change program, it should be for a reason, not just because lean is cool, so we're going to do lean, or we read an article in DevOps is super awesome and we should do that. You should be kicking off a change because there's some good and valid business reason, and you're accepting the fact that whatever change you're going to make is probably going to make things worse in the short term, and the better in the long term is worth that. And part of that change is usually requiring people to accept the fact that something they like is not going to be that way anymore, and it's very possibly something that's tied up in their ego, right? And so one theme here is a lot of times when Agile stories get told, there's this sort of us against them labor management thing, where it's the scrappy little teams are going to do Agile, and dumb, slow management, like the Dilbert pointy-headed boss who just don't get it, are busily saying no. And my experience is, well, that's certainly true. I'm sure they draw me as the pointy-headed boss in some things. This is about changes for everybody. Anyway, so in going into that, if I was going to ask them to change, not even ask, in some cases say, we are going to change, and they're going to have to give up their things that their ego is based on, that I had to do some admitting my failures and mistakes and my contribution to the problem that we had at that point in time. And so I've got a few examples here that I'll go through very briefly, but in this original version of this presentation, this section was about 2 hours long before we got into the other things, so you don't want to hear all those things. And probably, again, your mistakes are different mistakes. Moral of the story, just recognize them, own up to them. So for us, we had been a startup. When you're a startup, you don't have a lot of money, and you do things just, hey, we got to get it out there and see what works. And so we did a lot of just ship it, we'll fix it later. And that was right at the time we did it, but you can only survive that so long. And I was acknowledging to them that we had really pushed things too far in that vein. One of the reasons that we had done that was that we'd been in the process of raising money, which it's kind of like getting a loan from the bank. They only give you money if you don't actually need it. And so when you're raising money from VCs, you basically have got to demonstrate that you don't really need their money, but wow, if they miss out on putting in their money in this, they're going to regret it later. So it's not that I want your money. Truthfully, I could walk away right now, but if you want to put in money, that's cool too, and we'll all be happy. So you really have to, you've got to keep making things happen when you're doing that, and it takes a long time. It's one of those things where it takes longer than you think, even if you allow for the fact that it's going to take longer than you think. We went in with, hey, we've got the meeting, I'm sure that we're going to get money in the next couple of months. Well, no, now it's got to be the next meeting. Whoa, we've signed the term sheet. Oh, well, now it's the lawyers. Now it's the bank due diligence. Now it's something that we thought was maybe a couple months really ended up being 9 months from first conversation to cash in the bank. And we were stretching people the whole long time. What we were also doing during that time was we were trying to organize partnerships with 2 of the largest software companies in the world. And when I say partnerships, they could have been partnerships, they also could have been acquisitions. That's what partnership always means in the world of software, at some level, potentially. When I say largest, I won't say names, but I do really mean largest. One of their ex-CEOs likes charity a lot, the other one likes sailboats a lot. So I'll give you that picture. This really was big companies at a very high level. So we were trying to raise money while shipping it and fixing it, while trying to do partnership deals with very, very large companies, which again require you to do a lot of things that help the deal, but they don't necessarily help you with sales right now. So there was a lot of stretching going on. And finally, as an illustrative example, we had serious role clarity problems. So we were a startup that was founded by good friends. So I and my 3 co-founders have known each other for 15 years by now. We went to, kids' baby showers and geeked out on Battlestar Galactica and all those things for years and years and years. We're friends, which means when we started the company, while we had titles, whatevs, that doesn't really mean anything. Org charts, we're not doing that. And as we added people, it was our friends who knew us, and everybody kind of knows how it works. But at a certain point, we scaled past where that really worked. And we had some serious confusion where people just didn't know who was in charge of what and who they went to and how did they resolve conflict and all these kinds of things. So we were just in a situation where while there was, there was plenty of things that team leads and managers within the department were doing wrong and needed to change, a lot of the problems were my fault. And I needed to own up to that. So if you're in a leadership position, you're looking at organizational change, you gain a lot. You gain so much by being willing to be transparent about your failures, owning up to the fact that they're failures, not just, oh, I could have gone a little better. No, I screwed up. It was a disaster. That kind of thing. So that was a really important thing for this journey. One of the next things that was really crucial for our journey to success, or success to date, is helping them understand our business model, what makes the company tick. Because agile operations are all about delegating authority. You're delegating decisions. And that doesn't just mean pick this feature or pick that feature or use this tech or use that tech. They need to know timescales. They need to know, real things about budget availability. They need to have real understanding of what kind of numbers are the sales team thinking about. Their quotas, what does that look like for us on the tech side? And so one of the things that we realized that was causing a lot of problems was, so LeanKit's based in Nashville, Tennessee, which is in UK terms, it's the size of maybe Manchester or Sheffield, that kind of a thing. Regional town, it's not London, it's not Silicon Valley. So while we were hiring very smart technology people, these are not people who worked in startups before, right? So they're very smart, very sharp people, but they've come on board, they've been hired onto this growth stage company, and we've just raised all this VC money, and they've watched Silicon Valley, right? This means now we're going to scale up like crazy. They've got to expect a growing user. If we raise VC money, that must mean we've got to expect like 1 billion users in the next few years, right? It's going to be this hockey stick of users all around the world, and so I have to architect accordingly, right? If we're going to build new stuff, I've got to build it so that it's going to handle this deluge of users that are going to come in. Otherwise, it's going to be my butt on the line as the smart architect that you hired for this stuff. So they were thinking that. They were also, and so what we had to do is we had to disabuse them of that notion. We're an enterprise software company. We make lots of, given our scale, money from relatively few companies. And we charge, relatively more, certainly, than if you're doing a freeware product, that kind of a thing. So while we were expecting and have gotten strong revenue growth, it's not based on a hockey stick of users, it's based on more arithmetic growth of users and pushing up price points and adding on modules and all those kinds of things. So, our revenue model was not based on whoosh, to the sky kind of growth that they were scared of, and they needed to understand that better. The other thing that they needed to understand was that we are a software as a service company. So that means where we do monthly subscription selling and revenue. And what that means is that money I start getting this month is way better than money next month, which is way better than money the month after that. And so, where this came up was we had people who were, we had missed a monthly target towards the end of that year, and I had some of the software development leads who were saying, well, that's not that big a deal. We'll catch that up in the next few months. And if we don't do these scaling things in the technology, the whole thing's just going to fall down in a year, right? So there's 2 very different timescales at play there. What they need to understand is this, the green line, so this is a target line, maybe let's say this red line is our actual line, which they were just saying, well, it's just this little gap right here. Well, in subscription model math, the truth is the money I just lost is the space between those lines out to forever. It's not that gap for that month, right? The other thing, careful there. The other thing that they needed to understand was that while we had raised VC money, that was not the end of the raising of VC money. We were going to be, just as most growth companies are, we would be adding on bank financing. We would be doing additional rounds of VC financing, assuming we kept growing nicely, which we have and we've done. And each time you do this, you go to raise more money, there's the question of will they give us more money? And also, at what price? There's a huge difference based on your revenue and the growth rate of that revenue. And so these guys thinking, well, we'll make it up in a few months, was really not understanding that we needed to demonstrate results now in order to be able to get that money in the next year, 2 years, whatever the time scale might be. So, your business model, I'm sure, is different, but helping people really understand the fundamental mechanics of how your business works helps them make good decisions. Really important delegating authority. And if, at the end, all of our employees are shareholders, and so we were trying to help them understand that. The other thing we just said was, simple fact is, if you are hitting revenue targets and growing strongly, you get to build cool stuff, and when you say, hey, John, can I do? I'm usually going to say yes. If, on the other hand, revenue is flattening out, we are going to be stuck building Me Too features that somebody else already did, and when you say, John, can I? I'm going to say no later. So they sort of need to understand that. So business model, really important. Self-organization, again, I really am a strong believer in lean and agile, but that actually comes with a lot of stuff. It's self-organization within a context, a set of beliefs about how the world works. And they needed to understand the operating beliefs that I operate by, that the leadership operate by, and that we as a company are going to operate by. And I would tell you that if you are in a situation where you're not having real conversations about these things, and people are just saying sort of, oh, we just self-organize whichever way it happens, one of two things are potentially, well, maybe one thing is you could get lucky and it's all fine. I would not rate that chance highly. Another chance is that you're going to go out of business because you're going to go off the rails because you don't know where you're headed. And the third, potentially, if it's all going well, is somebody actually is just protecting you from the real world and keeping you in a bubble in which you're just sort of self-organizing. So the bumpers, you may not see the bumpers, but the bumpers are there. And I actually believe it's a lot better to treat people like grown-ups and say, these are the things that we're going to do, they're not negotiable, and these are the things that are. And now let's talk about those things. So for us, some of the not negotiable things was, well, we build Kanban software, and we actually do that because we believe in Kanban, and therefore we're going to practice that across the entire company. All of our processes are going to be managed through visual management in our product, because if you don't do that, how do you really know what's working and what's not? How do you have any credibility with your customers that you know what you're talking about? So crucially important thing, we were going to do Kanban. We were doing that as a way, we believe that Kanban fits into a context of lean. And again, that these principles, and I'm not going to go through all of these here. There's a lot on that slide. If you're interested, if you go to SlideShare, there's a whole multiple sets of slides from my talks that walk all through Kanban and lean principles, and you can probably get video recordings. So if you don't know about Kanban or lean, there's plenty of material out there. But the bottom line is, these are not just marketing things for us. These are things that we really firmly believe are the right way to operate a company, and we were going to do those things. And again, how we do them, quite negotiable. That we do these things was not. And again, there's this temptation, or there's this tendency that people sort of see it's a David and Goliath thing, where the team wants to do Agile, and it's management, whoever they are, they're behind a cloud like the Great and Terrible Oz, who are saying, no, you can't, we got to do things the old way. In our case, actually, we had pretty senior architects. We had pretty senior people in our quality group who didn't want to do some of these things because they actually didn't believe in it. And some of these people, we convinced it was the right thing. Other people, through their own choice, don't work with LeanKit anymore. Basically, let's get out to the point where you're not going to change my mind about some of these things, and if you think you are, that's not going to happen. So you probably want to be somewhere else. And that sounds hard, but I think not doing that just bottles up the trouble for later, rather than getting it out in the open and solving it right away. So we did a lot of talking about Kanban. We did a lot of talking about Lean. Did a lot of training. That's now very standard stuff for all of our new employees. And very happily for me, it's something that people now cheerfully, I walk into rooms and people are talking about what part of a process is waste. And they talk about lead and cycle time and all those kinds of things quite unprompted, which it makes me so proud. But one of the things we realized, that's sort of by now. One of the things we realized at first was there's a lot in this body of knowledge. And a lot of the things are sort of how do you structure the organization? They're sort of big picture things, big process things. And people, while they would say, yeah, we should do that, they didn't always really understand exactly how that applied to me today for a decision that I need to make. So Jon, give me a framework for making good decisions. It's probably not the Agile Manifesto. I've been doing this for a long time. That's all good and right, but I couldn't remember all of it. And so they basically said, Jon, if you could boil it down, what's something that if we just sort of, to start with, what's something that would help us make things that you would generally think are good and right decisions, right? And what we did is we took a look at what a number of our teams were doing. This wasn't just product teams, this was marketing teams across the company. And we started saying, where we saw good stuff happening, where we saw less good stuff happening, what were the things that we could kind of boil it down to say, as a rule of thumb, you're not going to go too far wrong if you do things this way. And what we came up with was that frequent, small, good, and decoupled was a pretty good descriptor for doing things right in a lean, agile, Kanban, Scrum, doesn't matter what you call it. If I plan my work in a way that I can deliver things frequently, not just fast, frequently, I got to keep it small. It needs to be good enough, and it needs to be decoupled both in design and also in terms of dependencies between teams, how we plan things. If I could plan things frequent, small, good, decoupled, I'd be in pretty good shape. So we started off with that. And it was very, very helpful. And again, this is something that's become part of the language of our company. What we ran into eventually, though, the way I used to show this was FSGD next to each other, and we had a picture of a soda can, like fizz good, as sort of the metaphor. What we realized, though, was that while all four of these things are really important and they are interlocking, they're not of equal importance for our company. For us, as a subscription software company, frequency of delivery is actually the most important thing. So when somebody buys SaaS software, they don't just buy what you have, they buy what they see you delivering because they're saying, hey, this is good, but I see it getting better, and so I'll climb on for the ride and I'll stay if I see that continuing to happen. So for us, frequency, hugely important. If you're a medical device software company, probably good is the most important thing. If you're a company that sells your product via APIs, then maybe decoupled design would be extraordinarily important because in essence, you're blind to the way that your customers use your product. So understanding which of these things takes precedence for you, for us it was frequent, was hugely important. Another thing that was hugely important in terms of developing out this idea and this metaphor was, well, what do you mean by good? Mostly what people mean by good is it satisfies the parameters that I care about, and if it's bad, it's low quality just means it doesn't do the things I want. And what we had to do was get out in the open the idea that, and again, there's potentially many other balancing factors as it relates to good, that for us, it's principally a balancing act between marketability and sustainability. So the features customers see as checklist items on the website versus the things you've got to do to make sure that the product is usable, stays up, is supportable, all those kinds of things. And those are gonna be in tension. You know, we all say like, well, they shouldn't be. Get over it. They're in tension. And that ideally, so understanding these balancing forces is one of the things they really needed to understand was that the one thing that they had most under their control as a team in order to make this whole thing work was keeping things small. So we have to deliver frequency. Good quality is always going to be a balancing act. The easiest way you have of keeping those forces under control is making things just as crazy small as you possibly can. Smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So just, you know, having something that people can really understand about how do we think at a simple, easy to remember level was really important for us. One of the things we came up with in dev for, well, how do we define good? And our marketing department actually has a very different one that matters for their work. But within our dev space, we came up with the acronym that something is good enough if it is TLDR. Too long, didn't read, you know, it was most people's documentation. But tested, logged, documented, and reviewed. You don't have to be perfect on all of these things, but you at least have to have some level of all of these things in place, even on your MVP, in order to have the ability to improve later. Having some level of testing, logging, documentation, review gives you the infrastructure to build better after you realize you actually do need to do that. Is anybody familiar with the pets and cattle metaphor in DevOps? Just one. So pets and cattle is a DevOps metaphor that actually repeats an old idea from Lean, which is that to do things at scale, you need to make things basically completely repeatable because they're identical. Very strong standardization of anything that's going to be repeatable. And the metaphor, thus the reason for the pets and cattle metaphor is, you know, people, you know, they keep both pets and they keep cattle, but we do it for very, very different reasons. We have pets because we love pets, right? That's what they provide us. And so we enjoy the fact that they are each special and different. That's what makes them great. And we treat them specially and differently. I've got a dog who has heart problems, and I spend silly amounts of money on something that provides no economic benefit to me, but it's my dog, I love it, right? If that was a cow, I would not spend that money keeping a cow with a congenital heart defect living. It would go to the butchers, because that's ultimately what a cow is about. And I say this as the son of a many years farmer. Yeah, you have cowboys, and you have cattle vets, and they protect the cows. But if they're really sick, and especially if they're going to hurt any of the other cows, you shoot them without any thought, you drag them off, and you buy some more. And most of those cows don't have names, they just have ear tag numbers. You know, there's the one cow named Bessie who's blind, who lives up by the house for the kids. But most of them you don't care about. So to relate this back to, some people, vegetarians, are probably horrified right now. This is why we don't eat meat. I'm going to become a Jane and put, you know, a screen over my mouth so I don't even hurt flies. But you know, the horrifying metaphor, it's not my metaphor, I promise. Aside is, so think about this. When we start off technology things, our technology tends to be pets. Each server has a name. Darth Vader, Chewbacca, Galactica, the TARDIS, etc. They're named based on which nerd was in charge and liked which show at the time that you put them up. Each one is totally different. There's only one guy in the company who knows how to fix TARDIS when there's a problem with TARDIS at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he takes tremendous pride in the fact that he's the TARDIS guy, and you know, you're not even thinking of firing the guy, but he knows that you never could because it'd fall down and you guys would be dead. Right? Well, you can't do that at scale. At scale, you've got to have it where your infrastructure is completely standard. It's containerized, it's automated, it's tested, all these kinds of things. So when there's a problem, I blow it away, I spin it back up. If there's a problem, I roll it back, I revert. All those things have got to be easy. It's the way you've got to operate. And as you do this, oh, that sounds like, well, DevOps, yeah, of course we're going to do DevOps. Everybody wants to do DevOps. Understanding that that's not just a technology thing, it's actually a psychological thing. There are people whose egos are built up around the way things work. Changing those things is going to make them scared. It's going to make them rebellious, and you're going to get you're going to get objections that actually have nothing to do with the technology, and we certainly did. In order to get there, it's like, all right, we're going to automate everything. We're going to containerize everything. We're going to all this kind of cool stuff. Develop the plan, roll out the plan. Well, like any other plan, your initial plan is wrong. It's going to suffer bumps and bruises along the way. The only way to really get to this is not just to follow the plan, is to be really aggressive about recognizing when the plan's not working and truly fixing that underlying thing and not just patching it. So in the lean world, the manufacturing world, you'll see production lines which will have like a cord or a button next to workers' workstations that they're supposed to press the button or pull the cord if there's ever a problem, and people come over and swarm and fix the problem. Well, you definitely have that, and they're used a lot in highly functioning manufacturing facilities. The truth is, in less highly functional manufacturing organizations, they are quality theater. And nobody actually pulls the cord or pushes the button because they're worried about getting in the way of progress. And that's something that we really saw at our company. We were telling people, hey, we're going to put these things in place. We're going to put this standardization. We're going to put this automation in place. We need you guys to help us solve deep underlying problems to make this really, really work, which means if you see something wrong, you got to stop the line, and we're going to really fix this. We're not just going to patch it. We're going to stop. We're going to do 5 whys. We're going to dig in. We're going to try to solve the root cause. Well, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. And what I found, my experience was that really getting this in place, and I think this is true of a lot of things, is I actually had to be the one who pulled the cord the first number of times that we had serious problems. And so I was in meetings, and people would be saying, well, yeah, we had a problem with this. Bob was up last night, and he was working on this. And I would say, well, that sounds pretty bad. Shouldn't we stop and fix that? No. I think I've got a fix. I'm going to work on it this weekend. John, it's cool, it's fine, because I know we need to deploy the thing, and so we just keep it out of the way. And I had to keep pressing and pressing and pressing and saying, no, don't we need to stop? No, don't we need to stop? Okay, just stop. Put everything down. Let's really fix these things. So a quality culture really is a cultural thing. And as with many cultural things, it really takes serious modeling by leadership to make it real and work. One of the things that we did as an organization, and by the way, I'm sort of blending here. I sort of started with principal things, must do. I'm now sort of gradually shifting to things we started doing, which were more, okay, well, how are we actually going to apply these things? Which are definitely, not imposed. They're more self-discovered and applied by the teams. One of the things that we did was we implemented the Spotify squads and guilds model to create cross-functional squads, small teams that have cross-functional things across the skills guilds. We used this very effectively for, I would say, a year, maybe a year and a quarter. Interestingly, we've now stopped doing this at the instigation of the teams. And they've come up with their own new model because they the balance here between squads and guilds, they didn't like as much. So if you are in a highly traditional projectized organization that treats people as resources, that kind of a thing, I would say that this model is a really good tool for sort of breaking that. But interestingly, or at least our experience has been sort of once people are actually operating pretty effectively, there's not necessarily any magic to this, so long as you don't shift back to a treat people as fungible resources and multi-slice them on different projects kinds of things. So interesting stuff. One of the other things that we did is we implemented squad rooms, which in a lean world you'd call this obeya. And we did two things at the same time. One was as we created the squads and guilds, our first efforts to do that didn't end up working that well. And we were sort of struggling with what the problem was, and what we came up with anyway, was we saw that some of our squads had a mixture of on-site people and remote people. And the on-site people ended up being the real team members, and the remote people tended to be sort of the redheaded stepchildren who weren't involved in things and didn't know what was going on and weren't communicated with as well and that kind of a thing. And so what we did was we reorganized so that a given squad was either an on-prem squad or it was a remote squad. And once we did that, we found that actually the remote squads function really effectively, highly collaboratively, because they're all remote. They're basically going on Zoom all the time. They're on Slack all the time. They talk all the time as if they're in a room together. And because everybody's on the microphone, nobody's suffering from the fact that, hey, some people walked away from the microphone and I couldn't hear what they said. So it actually works really, really effectively. So that sort of on-prem squad versus remote squad is one of the things that we did. The other thing that we did for our on-prem squads was we reorganized physical space to create rooms that were big enough for the squads. So there's this eternal debate between open space and private offices, that open space is supposed to be highly collaborative, and don't tell anyone, but the CFO likes it because you can squeeze more people into less space and so it's cheaper. Versus private offices are the super awesome thing that every developer loves because they can be by themselves in a room and nobody can talk to them, and they can close the door and they can just churn out code because that's what I want to do. I want to write lots of code. And what we said was, well, okay, total open space is not collaboration, it's just noise. Overhearing your teammates talking about things is useful collaboration. Overhearing other people from another team talk about what TV shows they watched last night, that's not collaboration, it's just annoying. Versus individual productivity doesn't matter. What matters is the throughput of the team. And so you being by yourself and being individually productive is not really the key thing. It's being together with your team so that, maybe writing code's not the right thing for you to be doing right now. It's having a long conversation between your teammates about what's the right code to write. These couple of things that we did to try to really push team cohesion and communication and move away from a world of sort of individual productivity or contribution and fungibility being the thing. These are some of the tools that we use. Like I said, at least as it relates to the squads, the teams have themselves reorganized a new model, but it's still not one of individuals getting assigned. What they've done is gone away from us. I won't go through the whole thing, but they're now in basically pairs or triads, and those get assigned to projects, but they always stay together with that pair or triad. One of the things that we did, and this is something I found tremendously useful, is we organized. So we're a Kanban company, both software and actually doing Kanban. And as I describe these things, we are still we are doing visual management. We are moving cards. We are deploying code. We are doing sort of continuous we're doing continuous delivery all the time. However, we do think that there's a value to cadence. And a balance between continuous and delivery and cadence are really important. So what we have done is we have a 6-week cycle. We call them sweeps because you got to have an acronym for everything. 6-week execution and evaluation period, I think is what we call them. And so the year is split up into 6 weeks. I don't mean a month and a half. I mean literally 6 weeks, because we wanted each week, each sweep to have the same number of days as a planning thing. Now, anybody who knows the calendar knows that the calendar doesn't work that way. If only it were that neat. happily, the last sweep of the year falls in the holidays. There's, in the US anyway, there's basically 3 weeks of holiday in that last sweep, so it actually makes it all work. But what we do is we have these 6-week sweeps. It's not just dev. The whole company basically stops and does alignment and training and other things about every 6 weeks, and then goes back to work. So this balance between sort of continuous delivery and also making sure that you're aligned with something that we want to do. We've also organized things like when people come into town, when we hold our board meetings, all these things aligned to the calendar. This sounds really, really micromanagey, but the alternative, I mean, one of the great things about this is that once we got it, at first it was, well, I don't know how we're going to make that all align. We've got client visits, we've got all these kind, we can't align this way. But once you do align that way, it becomes really easy to rely on when somebody's going to be available and when they're not. And if I work with them during that week, it's not an interruption, because that's what that week is for. It's a week of interruptions, and then 5 weeks of not being interrupted. So while it was a sort of a wrenching thing to get into at the beginning, and at the beginning it was just dev, and at first sales said, oh, that's stupid, we're not doing anything like that. They all do it now, because they've also realized the same benefits once they saw us doing it. We started doing a roadmap, which is hardly groundbreaking stuff, but for at first it's sort of a lean startup Kanban company that was, we're going to predict the future. Well, yeah, at some level. Doing that 6-week sweep cadence gave us a framework to begin doing this kind of road mapping, at least a little bit out. When we did it, what we didn't want to do, and so don't get me wrong, when I say sort of this 6-week thing, we do not break all the work down at the beginning of those 6 weeks and then burn it down. What we do is we establish goals, we establish high-level alignment, we establish understanding about finance and all those kinds of things. That's what we're doing in these time periods. And when we set these goals for what are the teams going to do during these sweeps, this is not broken out to the nth degree. It's really just saying, what's our intent? What's the overarching theme of this time period? We're going to pick out lots of features and stories to work on, but how would you describe that in an overarching way so that sales, marketing, et cetera, know generally speaking where the other departments are headed, and generally speaking when things might happen together, so that they can plan accordingly. They're part of the planning. And that gets again to this idea that, just as I said that individual productivity is not what matters, even team productivity is not what matters. What matters is value stream productivity. And if you're delivering software, commercial software, that value stream includes marketing. It includes customer support. It includes sales. All of those people have to know where things are heading, at least at a thematic level. So that's something we started doing. In terms of setting those themes, one of the things we started doing was doing A3s, which in the lean startup world they call canvases, because that's cooler. You can wear skinny jeans and say, canvas, whereas A3 you got to do in a suit. But anyway, so an A3 is basically literally A3 paper, for anybody who's not heard of this. The original story for this is in Toyota. Taiichi Ono was the head of product development for Toyota, and his leadership started realizing that when they would have meetings, he would only ever read the first page of any presentation that they put together, and then he would say, well, let's go see, and walk away. And so they realized that they had to make that first page as big as possible and fit as much stuff on it as possible, because he would actually read it. And so they started doing not A4, but A3 sheets of paper. So we do these A3s, and this isn't actually quite the format we use anymore. But we do this single sheet concept document for this, what's the overarching goal for the sweep. And it really is a business problem, not a spec. And one of the rules that we have about this is they have to be handwritten. Because you can cut and paste without thinking. That's what all my lawyers do. They just cut and paste words that have been used in the past and worked. It's what a lot of coding happens. It's what a lot of specs, the way they're written, is, hey, somebody sent that to me in an email, so I'm just going to cut and paste it and put it in the spec doc and this and this. Really easy to not think about it when you do that. Try it sometime. It's pretty hard to handwrite without actually thinking about what you're writing. It's also a constraint in the sense of what you can actually fit on the page, which is a scoping limitation. One of the things that we started doing, and I know we're coming up on time, so I'll wrap these last things quick. We started doing standard kickoffs for the squads. So when we would have the beginning of each sweep, we'd have a kickoff with each team. The way we did this was we would have a meeting with all of the team leads and myself and the other members of the leadership, where the team leads and we would talk about sort of cross squads. What are the intent? What is it that we're trying to do? And then the squad leads would each go off with their squad and they would do detailed planning. And then I come back and I meet with the squads, not with the squad leads. I meet with the whole squad, and they as a group present back what they're going to be doing during that sweep. Because what I want to understand is, did the whole team actually understand the intent, and can they read it back to me, and have they accepted it? Are they nodding and smiling, or somebody in the back of the room kind of grumbling and glaring at me because he hates me and there's no way that this can get done? So doing these sort of standard kickoffs. One of the things we started doing, and again, this is something we put in place and we've now stopped doing because it's not needed anymore. We started off with an intent of saying that, okay, teams, we want you to spend 20% of your time on stuff you want to do, kind of the Google model, that 20% time. Because while we're going to put stuff on the roadmap, there's stuff that you know you need to do that I'm not going to dictate you and I need to leave time. So we'll allow you 20% of your time to do those kinds of things. The problem was people had a very hard time actually making the time to do that. And so what we had to implement as a process was what we called squad-driven work, which was after planning week, the first week of the sweep was dedicated to whatever the team wanted to work on. As long as they could agree on it as a team. This is not individual desire. We do that as hackathons periodically. But as long as the team could say, hey, refactoring this is really important, or putting in this test harness is really important, or we need to spike this new tech to see if it's any good. Whatever it is, they didn't have to ask whether they did it, they could just do that. Very, very effective. We've actually stopped doing this now, and again, I didn't tell them to stop, they just stopped doing it themselves, because they realized that now that they've got WIP limits effectively in place on their boards, that's created organic slack that people are using to do these kinds of things on their own. But at the beginning, that just wasn't true, and so having this as sort of training wheels to help make that happen was really powerful. And I'll tell you, it allowed for the kickoff of one of the most important product rewrite projects we've ever done, which the teams had been wanting to do for a while and could never do enough prep work to justify. But this squad-driven work last year allowed them to have some time to do proof of concept stuff, which then they brought forward to me to say, hey, John, here's why we need to do this rewrite of some of the front end, and here's proof that this is actually going to be doable and it'll be performant and all these kinds of things. So giving them that time. We track lots of metrics. The teams track lots of metrics themselves. And I don't actually look at most of them, but two metrics that I demanded from them to kick off were very unscientific metrics. One was they had to do demos. So every 2 weeks we did demo day, and we invited the entire company, and all the squads did demos at the same time. Basically, we had a couple of hours, every squad had to come up, you had 5 or 10 minutes, and you had to demo something. There were no particular rules about it, you just had to demo something. And it really was just a social pressure thing of, hey, well, shit, we want to have something to demo. And also a praise and acclamation thing of they would get cheered. They demo cool stuff, and they feel great, and they want to do more. And they want to start asking the sales teams about, hey, why do you cheer so much about this? What else can we do? So without having any sort of official process about what velocity to demand or what the rules were, it was just, you got to demo. The other thing that we said was you have to measure your number of deployments. And what exactly a deployment means for your team, each team is going to be different. I don't care, as long as you keep your rule consistent for your team and you measure. We didn't measure the teams against each other. All we did was say we want to see each team's number of deployments go up each time period. And we got the people saying, well, John, if all you're going to do is measure the deployments going up, so we'll just break things into smaller things, and we can make our number keep going up. And I said, dude, cheat. Sure, whatever, do that. Because what I knew was they're not just going to break things down if it causes them a problem. It's going to force them to remove the impediments to deployment, which is the whole point of the exercise. And so by having these balancing measures of, hey, you got to demo something, and you've got to improve your deployment, that really helped us improve things. And at the very end, for those who've held out for this, so what did we achieve with this? Again, this is not an all-at-once thing. But we went from production deployments taking us about 3 hours per instance prior to doing all this. And we had multiple instances. We have even more instances now. It was pretty awful. It was totally unsustainable. That now takes 20 minutes for all of those things, which means we can do them all the time. Because automation has gone from 30% to 100%, creation of new instances has gone from 5 days to just a couple of hours, which is pretty much push the button and then go to Starbucks or play D&D while it's happening. We've been able to establish multiple data center, drastic reduction in data errors, about 4 times velocity / throughput improvement, and our entire infrastructure and operating costs and all of this stuff has gone down by 25% for all of these things. So I used to have a slide where I said people are happier and there's more alignment and all those kinds of things where it's just sort of easy to say. This is the hard numbers of it, that doing these things really was tremendously beneficial for us as an organization. Now, will I say that we're now in happily ever after and that we have no problems? Absolutely not. So I don't want none of this. If you're new to Agile or relatively new in your Agile, just do these things and then everything will work. Anybody who tells you that is probably trying to sell you something. So that is not true, but nevertheless, hugely beneficial stuff. And at the very least, I don't have to deal with this anymore. So that's good for me. If you want to learn more about Lean and Kanban, go to LeanKit. There's a tremendous amount of free articles, ebooks, webinars, templates, all kinds of stuff at leankit.com/learn. And if you want to talk with me on Twitter, I'm LeanKit Jon. Thank you very much.